Good afternoon, and welcome to MLevel's first of many webinars of 2021. I'm Ashley Alon, client partner here at MLevel, and we are excited to kick off this year with a very special guest, Emily Sheets. So Emily is a learning professional with over 10 years of experience, and she's actually been designing and developing innovative learning solutions for several companies such as the American Red Cross, Sanofi, Moet Hennessy, which I had to learn how to say that for this, as well as Nielsen. And at Independence Blue Cross, she's a learning consultant for the Operations Academy training team. Emily is also the host of a very popular L&D podcast called the L&D Forecast. Emily, we are so happy to have you here today.
I am so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, could you, if you don't mind, could you tell us a little bit about Independence? I know we have some insurance folks on the call, like Adam, but for those who may not be familiar with Independence and what you guys do, if you could provide a quick overview of Independence as well as your role.
Absolutely, Ashley. Thanks. Yeah. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Independence, we're a health insurance company with over 8 million members, and it's a part of the Blue Cross Blue Shield Association. Operations Academy specifically serves the operations area within Independence. We're a federated model, so there's other academies for other sections of the business. We serve the operations area, and our largest client is the call center within operations, which has over 700 agents total. As far as what I do a bunch. I triage projects as they come in from the business, from the various corners of operations, and I work with the team on brainstorming solutions, project manage active projects that we have on the docket. I consult with the business on learning strategy, and I also lead the digital efforts that we have within our group, and just kind of a little bit of everything.
In our relationship, I've definitely witnessed that you do a little bit of everything. So appreciate that. That was a great intro. So I know that some of you on the call are veterans of MLevel, but I also know that we have some newcomers, some new folks joining. So to quickly level set for some of those new guys, MLevel is a data-driven digital platform, and essentially we enable knowledge transfer, knowledge reinforcement, and knowledge assessment. And really, for those designers on the call, we provide the ability to do this quickly and easily for you to create engaging learning experiences using our templatized activities. So whether, like Emily, you're training in a contact center and you want to use scenario-based or games activities or engaging micro-learning activities, really connecting with your learners when and where they are, whether that's via the LMS or the LXP, a Teams chat, or in our new world that we find ourselves in, a lot of virtual ILT. Essentially, we're agnostic, and as I like to say, we're available to work anywhere, and all while capturing powerful and actionable insights. That's what we're here to talk about today. So think about that as the data about your learners and learning programs that can empower your organization to either improve your learning program or increase your learner knowledge to help increase sales, decrease costs, and or mitigate your exposure to risk. So thanks for bearing with me, for you guys who have known me for a long time. But before I turn things back over to Emily, let's go over our agenda. I thought it might be helpful to just kind of share with you all some thoughts on why we as learning and development professionals should care about data. And then I'll flip it back over to Emily to walk us through 3 stories. So she's going to walk you through 3 real-life examples of how data was used to transform their team at Independence. And then we'll have a quick Q&A, but don't be shy. You can ask questions in the chat. I know people are still coming in, but once that's done, we can start monitoring the chat for any questions you might have. And then stick around because Emily is going to share what they are doing this year in 2021. And this is very exciting because she's going to touch on, obviously, some things she's doing with MLevel, which I know a lot of you will find interesting, but then other ideas and avenues that they're pursuing. And then I'll close it out with a few announcements. So I'm excited. And I'm also nervous. For those of you who don't know me, anyone who knows me knows that like this is me stepping outside of my comfort zone for 2021. So trying new and exciting things. But one of the topics that I thought might be helpful to touch on today, like I mentioned in the agenda, is why should we care about data? And Josh Bersin, who I know you guys follow, most of you at least, he recently published an article, and that article was titled "A New Model for Corporate Training, the Adaptive Learning Organization." I'll share the link so that you guys have it, but I'm not necessarily talking just about adaptive learning, right? I'm talking about the adaptive learning organization. And so they've been searching this for many, many years, and the findings boil down to, it's on the screen, but adaptive practices are now the key to success. So it's not just about being digital. It's not just about connecting with your learners where they are, right? And it's not even just about learning strategy. It's really about the 15 critical practices that he identifies in the article that drive success. So at the end of the day, the focus is about how do we build learning strategies that are both high impact and highly relevant? And in my opinion, a big part of the answer in one of the critical practices lies in the data. My mom has a saying that you can't change what you don't know, and you don't know what you can't see. And I mean, think about that. The same applies to learning. You can't improve or change your learning programs if you can't truly see how they are performing. And I'm not talking about like an 80% pass rate, right? I'm talking about seeing into the minds of your learners, like understanding and knowing their knowledge gaps. And I don't know how you can do that without the use of data. And especially in today's new normal, where we are more digital than ever, using data in new and different ways to provide value to your clients. So like Emily mentioned, and I mentioned, whether it's a contact center like she's doing, or retail, or corporate wide. I mean, the list goes on and on. It could be compliance, it could be risk training, but having the data and insights about your learners and your learning programs is powerful, but only once you get your team to start using the insights and taking action. And so I'm excited because, that's one of the things Emily's going to talk to you about today. So Emily, before you share more about the Ops Academy and the transformation that y'all saw with the L&D team in 2020 as a result of looking at that data, right, and really changing your behaviors, can you provide an overview of some of the challenges the Ops Academy was facing when we first met?
Yes. Yes, I can.
Good.
Thank you so much for that tee up and that reference to the Josh Bersin article. I'm a big fan. But yeah, no, as I mentioned before, the Operations Academy is the learning team responsible for serving the operations organization, which among others includes that call center with over 700 agents. And that's really where I'm going to have a lot of the focus of today's discussion. So I'll give you our typical approach, some background. Our typical approach would be 12 weeks of new hire training. When we were in the office before the pandemic, that was in-person ILT, very intensive. Now it's all virtual, and we were able to go virtual with it, and we have 12 weeks of new hire training totally virtually, which is wild, and we had to kind of do that overnight. And then, so we have that new hire training. Then we have the occasional up training or specialized training. You come in, you get trained as kind of a general agent, but then you might be up trained into a different area or category so you can handle an additional type of call or a specialized type of call. And then we would have continuous learning. We might need to have a refresher on certain systems, or if the business is finding claims calls are particularly challenging, we might do some kind of refresher or continuous learning around that. For continuous learning, we'd create a curriculum based on business need and trends, but we didn't know who truly needed the class and who didn't. it would be kind of a general, well, claims calls seem to be problematic. And, some of the participant feedback that we would get would be, I didn't need this. I already know this. I'm fine with claims calls. Don't know why I was in this class. So that's 3 days of time for nothing. And that's a waste of people's time, which is a terrible learner experience. But it also costs money to take people off the phone, away from their jobs. So it's terrible business experience as well. The learner experience is poor with that. The business experience is poor. And I'm coining and copywriting the phrase business experience. So copyright, somebody write that down, don't steal it. But the good news is that we were really doing some things right. So we would incorporate best practices with hands-on activities, simulations, just to let people practice, and it would help us get a sense of people's comprehension. We'd also include knowledge checks, but this was mostly self-knowledge. So I might go through a knowledge check, but nobody was really checking my score or doing anything about it. And when you're a trainer in a face-to-face class, you can see confused expressions and spend a little more time on a particular concept. But with virtual, it's a little harder to get that gauge. And I really like that phrase that you used earlier, Ashley, which is like to look inside of a learner's mind. That is the great challenge. Potentially people could walk away not understanding very key concepts, especially in this virtual world. If I'm off camera as a learner, the trainer won't see that confused expression, right? We might have learners walking away not understanding key concepts. And, we learned later that they absolutely were. Key learning objectives were getting missed. Early in the design process, we identify key learning objectives. So like any good learning process includes, but we'd ask assessment questions at the end of class that were tied to learning objectives. But this was mostly to ascertain whether they could pass, right? Like 80% pass rate, like you were talking about. And it really wasn't to understand what they learned. It was like, do they know enough to take a call now? There might have been a question aligned to a certain learning objective that everyone got wrong. Maybe it wasn't covered well, the content wasn't quite right, but now everybody's back on the job with the same misunderstanding. That was a huge, huge issue. The worst of it, or the most frustrating part for me, was that we would get data and learning analytics here and there. So we'd have these assessments and a mountain of business data, KPIs of first call resolution and QA scores and things like that, but it was a pile, and we'd get it in our inbox, and it was all manually gathered. So there was no smooth way to organize it and interpret it into actionable insights. As an example, imagine you have 30 different assessment scores, and now I have to calculate like who got what question right and try to organize that into something useful. That's really time consuming and difficult. You could spend a ton of time with paper assessments or LMS assessments trying to make sense of them with Excel spreadsheets and calculators. Literally the graphic that just came up on your screen, I had that on my screen with data, and I would like try to get something out of it, and it's just not practical. And so, imagine that you have a class that 700 people go through. Interpreting that level of data set is impossible.
Well, and Emily, I just want to say you're not alone, because I know several of the names on this list and they suffer the same challenge.
We can share in each other's pain. Yes. So you could call that the before picture, though. There's good news, and I'm glad you're here and would love to connect with you. I love talking about this stuff. You could call that the before picture, right? We're doing, some stuff well, but there's definitely areas to improve and evolve, right? And we'll get to the after picture in a little bit with the stories. But I want to talk about, there was this moment in between the before picture and the after picture where the transformation like really began. And that's where Ashley and I just talked. Like Ashley, my friend who is on this call with me, we just talked, and we had this situation going on, which I just described to you, where we're doing some things right, there's some things we can do better. And then I came on board with the company and with MLevel just getting started. And I started talking with Ashley and shared with her some of these challenges that we were having, shared with her some of the frustrations that we had around data. We knew it was important, but like how, we had already purchased MLevel before I came on board, but we really she and I took time to share. we shared, and I shared the challenges we were facing and some of the successes, what our leadership liked, just to let her know those things and get to know me and how I think and the places that I saw opportunities. I shared with her our overall kind of learning ecosystem, who the players are and different devices that we use. And we just shared, right? Big theme is sharing. Ashley listened, right? She didn't try to sell me on features. She took the time to get to know me and our team and how we operate. And then she shared stories of what her other clients were doing. And it began this kind of organic back and forth sharing that led to aha moments. In our process of looping in MLevel and getting our arms around learning analytics, we were thoughtful, we were deliberate, we took an iterative approach, and it really worked for us. The key, I think, was having a mindset that didn't put the features first, but rather the people engaging with the tool first. Like, yeah, that feature is really cool, but I don't know how to get everybody to do it. And the theme that you'll see throughout the stories that I share is that all of them are attached to an instructor-led training. That was always our focus in the past, so we figured out how MLevel could really work with that and with that focus, rather than try to make it some kind of replacement or completely undo our process. So we really asked, who are the people engaging with the tool and how would they like to use it? What won't be jarring, as an experience? And it began this kind of beautiful organic process that happened, in order to really get it going. All right. All that said, I'm going to share with you some stories about how we transformed into a data-driven learning team, mainly using the features that MLevel provides. And these stories really bring to life our team transformation and how it's impacted our learners in the business.
I did not pay her for that little snippet.
I know, it sounds like I'm a shill for MLevel. I'm really not. I just love it. So the first of our 3 stories is about the champion agents. So grab your pen. This is where it really gets good. In November of 2019, we trained a group of premier agents on a new model called Champion. To give you a sense of what Champion is, so when an agent is first hired, they're sort of hired as a general agent, so they can take a certain kind of call. But then as they've been around for a while and they've gotten their feet wet with those general calls, we tend to move them as they advance into special groups that service special kinds of calls or special kinds of customers. The premier group, think of it this way: the general population is taking general kinds of calls, and the premier agents are serving a higher touch customer. And then the champion agents are like another tier of service. So like the best of the best of the best. When this began, we really needed to make sure that they were the best of the best of the best. We developed a 2-day ILT, which would hopefully give these agents the knowledge that they needed to be these excellent reps to the member groups who had bought the champion service. What happened after that initial training in June of 2020, we partnered with the champion supervisor to send the current champion reps an MLevel knowledge booster. Really simple. It contained 8 questions. It was about key concepts that they learned back in November of 2019. And so it was nothing new. This was something that they should have learned back then, and they should have been practicing regularly over the last couple months since they had become champions. What did we find? Surprising. After we sent out this booster, this is what we found. A couple of things. Questions answered about champion service were answered correctly only 66% of the time. And this was the lowest scoring category of type of question. More specifically, less than half of the reps got this important question right. If a member's information is added to the repeat contact report, who's assigned the customer's issue? One of the most important tasks an agent does is to follow up on questions and own a customer's issue. So if I call in, I'm a customer, I have independence insurance, I'm calling in and the agent isn't able to resolve my issue, okay, I hang up and then I call back in and then I call back in again. My name goes on this repeat contact report and somebody's got to handle that. And the question was geared around who handles that issue. And there was this big misunderstanding about who was supposed to handle a repeat issue. And this was letting customer issues slip through the cracks and nobody knew who owned it. A member goes on the repeat contact report only if they've called multiple times. This indicates that they clearly have an issue that isn't getting resolved. In contact centers, all my friends out there who support them, you know that there's a huge customer service experience no-no. And many of the reps were assuming that someone else is responsible for follow-up, which meant that no one was following up, and this had to be addressed immediately.
Which meant impact to CSAT, which meant continued
Yes.
calls.
My friend Ashley knows. She knows. But I want to pause for a moment here, right? And Ashley, you're right to say that, because I think you really have to listen. If you're eating lunch and you've been only mildly paying attention so far, let's pause for a moment, because this is really important to land. Imagine that we hadn't found out that knowledge gap existed. That issue could have lingered indefinitely and caused all kinds of downstream negative business impacts. So the first thing that we did was notify the supervisor and the manager of the champion team of the knowledge gaps, specifically that repeat caller report question. Then they were able to meet with their team immediately to address the misunderstanding and get everybody on the same page. The designer and trainer benefits are clear as well. With this simple metric, we begin to transform into that data-driven learning team. The title of this whole thing. Not only are we empowering the business to take action with this information, but it takes the guesswork out of the key question that we ask our learners, which is, do they get it? The designer was able to make an update to the ILT curriculum to emphasize the problematic key points. And we informed the trainer of this knowledge gap so that during the next training, they could address and hammer home this very important key concept. The important thing here is it's so simple. Our trainers and designers don't need to be data scientists to understand the benefits. It's immediately apparent. Recall on the last slide, you could really easily see the correct response rate for each question. It's laid out there. It's very simple. And the one at the bottom is like, oh, less than half of the people are understanding that. And you don't need to be a data scientist to see very simply where there's a problem and where there isn't. It couldn't be some complicated thing. It has to be straightforward, and this is. If it's overwhelming and confusing, we can't confidently take action.
So true, so true. So for you folks out there, don't be shy. I mean, if you have any questions about what Emily's sharing, please jump in the chat. And also, I do want to ask you all to participate. So again, don't be shy. If y'all don't, that's fine. But I have a poll question up on the screen. Obviously, y'all can all read, but just if you wouldn't mind, just drop in, like, how does your team measure soft skills today?
I really hope you guys put answers in the chat as honestly as possible, because my answer, if I was in the audience, is we simply didn't really measure soft skills. But in a contact center environment, soft skills are so crucial. Members, shouldn't be talking to robots of information. We should provide accurate information in a confident and compassionate way. You can easily measure accuracy, but confidence and compassion is really tricky. So that would be my answer.
Awesome. Thank you. So we've got some coming in. It looks like multiple ways, speech and text analytics. Not nice, because Adam, they're fancy over there. But a lot of we don't, none, gives less sample size though, AI 2, evaluation studies internally. Mastery through MLevel, quality monitoring through AI and human monitoring. Awesome. So we've got some stuff in the chat, so that's really exciting. Really appreciate you guys getting a little interactive there. And I don't think we have any questions, so let's jump into the next story just to keep things going with time.
Yeah. So next up is managing the experience. Another difficult thing to measure is stress and the management of stress. Speaking about soft skills like compassion and confidence, it's really hard to come off as compassionate and confident if you're stressed. So we identified this as an issue with the business in partnership. They said we really need to help our call center representatives understand how to manage stress, not only within themselves, but with the members calling in. We're a health insurance company. The things that people are calling in and talking about and dealing with when they have to deal with a health insurance company, they can be really intense. They can be innocuous and not that big a deal, or they can be that you're pregnant or a loved one has been diagnosed with cancer. You know, these are the times when you're calling us, and we need to be able to show up to those really stressful conversations. There were a couple of flags that occurred in the call center that we really saw some reps struggling with this. And so we wanted to give them a learning experience that would give them practical tools for handling stress, not only in themselves, but also in the member. And it's important to be able to deal with it in both yourself and in the conversation when you're a rep. So in the summer of 2020, we launched the Managing the Experience initiative, and this is what happened. We had the participants, before we did the ILT, they filled out a confidence survey. We didn't ask them specifically, like, how do you handle stress, right? We said, how confident are you? We felt that this was going to be a little closer to the metric that we were going for, because really at the end of the day with soft skills, you know, and with the tool that we're using, it's really how comfortable are you behaving in X way or doing X. So we had them complete a confidence survey both before and after, and we wanted to show, you know, how comfortable the agents felt with the new skills that they were being taught throughout the class. Because remember, we're giving them practical tools to use and practical ways to handle stressful calls. We wanted to see how confident they were before being handed the tools and then after. Our findings are really cool. So with each of the 3 bullets you see on screen, they really represent 3 levels of data. The highest level, overall confidence, increased by 23%. The blue bars are aggregate scores within the activity container with all the questions. So that's kind of the highest level there. The next metric, I really love it, and it's 1 level down from the overall. So the number of reps who reported their ability to reset after a difficult call increased by 36%. All the confidence questions tagged to the ability to reset after a difficult call, which is probably the most practical of all the sets of tools that we gave them. That number is much higher than the overall confidence, which is so remarkable. And you know, putting myself in the position of an agent, I want to be able to go into my next call fresh and measured, rather than carrying forward the stress that I feel from that previous call into my next interaction with the next member. That was a really big deal for us. I want to point out something before I get to the last bullet that you see on screen here. The slide that we saw before with the MLevel metrics, thinking back to that slide, remembering those were individual questions. What you're seeing here with the blue bars is the percentages before and after. The after, because it's listed by higher percentages, is higher up. So we were able to see right away as the data was coming in how much the overall confidence was increasing across all participants. We had that individual question view, but this is 1 level higher up and averages all of those question responses, which really gives us interesting data on overall impact. Rather than seeing trends at an individual question level, we were able to look at trends as a whole. Secondly, as a reminder, this is different because we weren't really measuring knowledge. We were analyzing confidence in areas associated with behavior and soft skills, etc. Okay, that last bullet point. The area of lowest confidence post-training was in response to this question. How confident are you to handle a call in which the member threatens to harm himself, herself, or others? 62% were still not confident after we gave them the skills and tools to handle these types of calls. There was still 1 type of call that was problematic. Only a little over half the respondents felt confident in handling this. So we had this little nugget here to work with, and I'd like to share with you what we did based on some of the findings that we found, particularly around that. While our actions focus on that 3rd bullet from the previous slide, the first 2 bullets are important because they really help build a case that the training had a positive impact for learners. So similar to the previous example, you know, we identified those 3 key areas, but unlike champions, since these were soft skills, the follow-up actions were a little bit more hands-on. The designer created supplemental post-training support material and made it available on a separate content area called the micro-learning library. We highlighted and featured content that spoke directly to the opportunity areas. So rather than going back into the curriculum and editing, we created post-training support because particularly with something like stress, you really need those consistent reinforcements to keep that fresh and to keep it strong. The trainers analyzed the opportunity areas and placed more emphasis in class on those key areas. The business leadership reviewed and updated knowledge management process documents related to members who threatened to harm themselves or others, so that reps could have a clearer direction on how to handle these types of calls. You shouldn't have to guess when you're navigating a really difficult call like that. You should have very clear procedure to follow, and that's what we adjusted. The knowledge gap really demanded, or the confidence gap really demanded a process to detail step by step the correct and proper actions rather than tips in a curriculum.
That's interesting. Thank you. So we're going to do another poll question. This one, I feel like punchline's kind of already been taken. However, hopefully y'all join in again. But in your experience, have you ever had your learning program result in user interface design changes to like a key system or application? So as a result of your learning program, you made system changes, like you went to the IT team and said, make these changes. Anybody? No is an okay answer. Yes is an okay answer as well. But if you would, drop it in the chat. So Emily, what about you guys? Have y'all ever had that happen?
No, definitely not. I think if I was in the audience, this is what I would say, but it nicely leads into my next story. So we really couldn't get to the granular data that you would need in order to be able to make a suggestion to influence the user interface. An example, one of the question formats that MLevel has is the hotspot image. So when you're learning a new system, you have to know what it looks like and what the buttons look like, especially if you have challenges getting into a training environment and to play with it and touch it. And in the example that follows that I use, we had to kind of recreate it based off of wireframes of the software to give participants the ability to see it, because the training environment was still being developed. So the participants were able to click around the system on the recreated system on the screen. So we were able to get a little bit closer to the level of do they know where to click, which is important because you're interacting with this new interface. You need to know where to click. And there are MLevel question types that allow you to have that image on screen and that ask you to click the right button on the screen. And we didn't really have anything like that before. You have typical authoring tools that allow you to have images and hotspots, of course, but in our case, they don't really track where a learner clicked and whether they clicked in the right place.
Well, we had a few responses. So no, 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 and then yes-ish. Love it, Tom. But it was something we discovered in learning analysis, and everyone can see the chat, I think. So I think we're good. Like a walk me. Yeah.
I'm going to go back and read all the
chat. Of course.
Yes.
Awesome. So if we could kind of motor through this one real fast, if you don't mind, and then we can jump into any Q&A, and then I know the 2021 would be valuable for folks, what you have on the roadmap.
Yeah, let's go. So Softphone, I like to call this story Change Doesn't Have to Be Scary. And the reason for that is in the summer of 2020, we launched a training for a brand new phone technology that all the call center reps would be expected to use. Understanding this new phone technology would be critical to the success of the call center. The analogy that I like to use, if I'm a call center representative, my phone is where I do business. It's the central technology of what I do to perform my job. And it would be like if a pilot was in a new airplane and they had totally different layout for all their indicators and instruments. It's like that. It's a really big deal. It's that big of a change. Going from a physical phone on their desk to one that's entirely in their laptop it's just a huge change. So we really needed to be very thoughtful about how we handled a change like that. We came up with a virtual ILT, 2 days long. Participants were asked to complete knowledge checks so we could gain real-time understanding into overall comprehension of the brand new system, the features, and how to use it on the job. What we found was that the features knowledge check had the lowest overall scores at only 65%. After some analysis, we realized that there were 2 questions about features that were really dragging down the overall percentage. One of the 2 questions was, and they were very similar, but with different buttons, which tab on the navigation menu would you click to update the member's telephone number and email address? That was the question. This is something that a rep does on a fairly regular basis, and it's a very basic function, but only 20% of the people were getting it correct. So 4 out of 5 people are missing this and they don't know what button to click. What action did we take based on these insights? So what we did was we alerted the Softphone design team, the internal team that designed the software. And we let them know that there were 2 icons that were not intuitive in the graphical user interface. When you really look at the question and try to find the button that it references, you should be mostly able to intuitively figure it out, even if you haven't been trained on it. But it wasn't intuitive. And most of the features questions people got correct because even if you don't remember, you can kind of figure it out. You know, think of your iPhone, any interface that you interact with, you kind of like guess, right? You know, so we shared that with the design team and they are planning on making some updates to those buttons to make them more intuitive. So we had an impact on that. Awesome. The trainers viewed the knowledge gap trends and they modified key emphasis points. During the sessions over the summer, they were able to look at the problem areas and were able to emphasize the key points that were getting missed based on the previous sessions. The designer updated the location of the knowledge check within the curriculum. So we found it was happening a little bit too soon and we moved it back after a certain segment of content was trained to make sure that it followed appropriately. So we were able to make that simple adjustment. And again, like it's simple, but it's revolutionary because in the old world, that curriculum design would have stayed the way that it was. There was no insight for the designer to react to, nothing to fine tune. And it really might seem like a small thing, but if it lingers in a curriculum forever, it can have a really big impact.
Yeah, for sure. So, you know, I know you guys are here to learn about transformation and right, like whenever you think about transformation, digital transformation, for example, just because we had digital devices and laptops, it didn't mean that everyone was digital. Like digital learning was never really consumed at mass until last year, right? We were kind of forced. And I think transformation and data-driven learning transformation and the transformation that you saw, it's not just because, oh, now they have the data, because we have lots of clients who have the data from MLevel. It's about how do you change the behavior? What is the behavioral changes that I have from my role that I'm now going to do differently going forward? And I think this just touches on it, but, and I know you guys can read, but Emily, if you wouldn't mind, just kind of expanding on this.
Yeah, totally. And I love how you tied that together. That was very perfectly said, you know, and what I'll say is you kind of read through some of the things that you can actually do within your role. What I'll say is regardless of tool, you need a learning analytics dashboard to be successfully data driven. That's really the first thing, the first lesson. Before any of these roles can do anything, you need that dashboard in order to bring it all together. Or like I said before, it's a pile. I put this slide on here because whenever I go to a webinar, I want to walk away and know what should I do? Like, thanks for the information, but what should I do? So I really wanted to include this because once you have that dashboard in place, these are 3 very practical, easy things that each function on your learning team can do. And I gave some of these examples, you know, but feel free to modify them in any way, but take this back to your team and talk about this. Like, is this something that we can do? The answer should be yes. You'll have this as a starting point, and that's what it is. It's a starting point. It's just 3 things. If you're a manager, designer, or trainer, that you can do tomorrow if you have that learning analytics dashboard in place. You don't have to be a data scientist. That is my message. You don't have to be a data scientist. You can start this now. You can use data practically in your job right away.
Awesome. Thanks. So, guys, it's now that portion of Q&A. Definitely have some questions that were sent of folks who were eager to understand. And we have 2 key ones that I'd love to get answered. But if this doesn't address any of the questions that you all have for those listening, please don't hesitate to drop them in the chat. But really, this was great, Emily. So what did you do to get started? Like, how did you guys get started?
Great question. I think I would probably be asking the same thing if I was in the audience. So I'll give you a quick rundown. The first thing is to identify trainers and or designers on your team who like new things. Start with them, get their buy-in, get them to build pilots because they'll want to. Once their peers, who might be a little more hesitant, see the success that they're having, they'll ask about it naturally. And then the new thing becomes the baseline rather than the new. The second thing I would say, very like little thing that we did, but it was a lot of fun. We did an MLevel hackathon, right? So using hackathon loosely, we all got together for an afternoon and we built an MLevel together, everybody. We had coffee and snacks and we made it fun. So sometimes just signing into the tool is like the biggest hurdle. So we all did it together and did a project together, and it was really cool. It was a great afternoon. Awesome. Lastly, start small. That's the other thing. Just pick one thing that you want a trainer to do or a designer to do. Pick one single project, build one knowledge check for it, or build a knowledge booster and send it out. See the results that you get back. We really didn't notice the magic of MLevel until we started seeing the learning analytics come in and the dashboards build. We were like, whoa, but if you notice from the stories, there's nothing mystical about what we did. The primary areas where we took action were at the question level. And there can be a lot to look at in MLevel or any learning analytics dashboard, but just start with the questions and the correct response rate. It's a great starting point, and then you can branch out.
Awesome. I do want to be mindful for time, but I did want to also ask, and maybe I shouldn't ask, but what were some of the challenges or roadblocks that you face? Because, change is hard. And sometimes when, people are just happy doing what they've always done, getting them to change might be difficult. And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but whether it was with your fellow colleagues or your leadership team, what was difficult or a challenge that you faced with getting?
Yeah, no, I hear you, and you're totally right. Doing any kind of big change within your group or expecting somebody to do their job differently can be challenging. And I think I kind of covered in my previous answer what, fellow colleagues, like how I kind of overcame their hesitance to get started, which did take time. But in focusing on leadership, they didn't get, they approved the purchase of MLevel, but okay, so why are we spending money on this? That's always the business's question. It's like, why I'm giving you all this money, what are you doing with it? And what I'll say to that is leadership wants to see results. And the best piece of advice that I've heard is to avoid using L&D jargon. Use the language that the business uses. So we ran pilots and shared results. They like the word pilot, they like the word results. And we built PowerPoint decks that explained impact. We didn't, just report where the knowledge gaps exist, although we did, and recommendations on how to fix them. We shared the positives too. So for example, I think, the managing the experience 23% jump in confidence was a great success story to share with them. So I think it's really just telling the story to leadership and using the language that they use in order to tell that story, to overcome any questions that they might have about the investment that they've made.
Well, so in that kind of building on that, I think that's a nice lead into your 2021, because I already have insight into what your 2021 looks like, or at least goals, right? So roadmap, vision, if you will.
Yep.
And so do you talk about that and just the overall theme as a result of the support that you have received from that leadership team using the business vernacular?
Definitely. Yes. I'm floored about our 2021 plans, actually. And I know you know this because I've called you just I gotta tell you what's happening. So 2021 is here. Yay. 2021 gone. It's in the past. And now we are looking forward. But the overall theme for us with 2021 and MLevel and how it kind of fits together is data justification for every minute spent in training, using learner profiles and targeted topics. So I could get into a little bit about what that means, but this is the dream, and one that really excites our leadership the most. We did not have the insights necessary to do anything other than put everyone through a broad and general training on a topic, which is, like I said, is a waste of the learner's time and the business's dollar. The vision is on an individual basis. We want to give folks content that's relevant to them in their time of need. So as learners engage with MLevel, we build learner profiles, which allows us to see strengths and weaknesses. We can deliver targeted learning to them based on these profiles. And then as for topics, let's say we want to do a refresher training on claims. Well, what aspect of claims is challenging? We can find that out and narrow the scope of the topic to be more relevant. So perhaps a 2-day refresher training can get focused down to 3 hours.
So it's like a lot of continuing that journey of being a more adaptive learning organization.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly. A lot of the stories that I shared were kind of post everything, but now we want to get ahead of the design and really let the data drive what we're designing and what we're doing ahead of the curve rather than in response to. The next thing, this is kind of boring, but necessary, and I wanted to put it on here because it is, but it's MLevel governance documentation. Now that we've experimented and piloted, we need to really get the necessary administrative work of putting together guidelines for usage of MLevel. So branding, how to tag questions, et cetera, all this needs to be documented. The next thing is the year-end business impact report. So again, coming back to leadership and helping them understand what this thing is and why it's necessary. At the end of 2021, we're going to put together a deck that looks back on how the usage of the data justified training approach has saved the organization money. It's the infamous ROI. It costs money to pull people off the phones or away from their jobs. So how can we minimize that and impact ROI in that way? The next thing is rapid intervention or knowledge gap kind of diagnostic cycle. So the targeted and flexible nature of MLevel allows us to deliver learning interventions way more quickly. Rather than having to develop and heavily rely on ILT curricula to be developed, we can drill down to the core challenges and deliver that targeted content quickly. So it would look something like an individual or a team opportunity is identified. We capture a baseline using MLevel or other data sources. We do a rapid intervention, a microlearning, something quick and targeted, and then we capture if there's any growth using, again, MLevel or those other data sources. So rapid intervention and a before and after, snapshot. Lastly, we want to expand the use of MLevel beyond Operations Academy. We have been using it on our team, but we see a lot of potential in letting the others. So partnering with coaching and knowledge management and QA teams, seeing how they can use it in their work. I think there's a ton of opportunity there. We're already beginning those conversations. Integration with other data sources to tell a more holistic story of performance. So, as you've been watching this presentation, you might have said, well, where's the typical contact center KPIs and how do those interweave and affect one another? The MLevel analytics versus, first call resolution, for example. We want to really start to marry those two and expand out. We also want to do team view dashboards so that it's easier to see how teams are doing and organize the data that way. And then lastly, we see opportunities to use MLevel as a knowledge platform product. And what I mean by that is health insurance is very complicated and dealing with health issues is challenging. And if there could be a way that we could leverage MLevel to deliver content to our customers and really help them understand what health insurance is, for example, or how to manage a diabetes diagnosis, we might be able to leverage MLevel as a customer education tool as well. So lots of big ideas and big things coming in 2021, and I couldn't be more excited.
Awesome. So we did have a question come in from Carrie.
Yeah.
Have you experimented with XAPI and transmitting key learning metrics into performance dashboards? And she posted that before you talked about integration with other data sources.
Yeah. No, great question. And I think I did touch on it. Learning analytics are great in and of themselves and magical when they stand on their own, and you can take a number of actions based on them. But I think the next evolution, like I mentioned in the 2021 plans, is really starting to bring in some of those data sources and how they work and marry together to tell that more holistic story of performance. Because you know, we have room to evolve. This was really just us getting our feet wet and understanding how data can impact the work that we do regularly. But then to be able to really understand performance and how it ties into knowledge and really getting to those levels 3 and 4, et cetera, that is definitely a big goal of ours. So short answer is no, but we are working on that. And we actually have some resources on the team that aren't directly on the learning team who are tied to those data warehouses, to those data sources, who we work with really closely and have a lot of conversations with. Ashley knows who I'm talking about, but we have big visions there on how to really combine those efforts.
And Carrie, I can connect with Josh and share with y'all some of the stuff that we're doing with some other clients, or at least where we've dabbled in this area. Okay, cool. Lots of stuff to come, and I know we're coming up. I kind of wanted to get you guys released at 12:50 because I know we've all got other stuff to get to, but did want to invite you all to our upcoming events. But before I do that, I do want to say thank you to Emily for joining us. I also want to say thank you to Logan, who has been behind the scenes. So without her, I would not be able to have pulled this off. So very excited that we were able to see many of your names today and hear your questions. I know that Philip Douglas has another question, but real quick, our next webinar is February 25th at 2 p.m. Josh has a great panel lined up for you guys. And if you loved what you heard today from Emily, I mentioned she has a podcast called the L&D Forecast. So don't hesitate to sign up and get it on Apple Podcasts or wherever you like to get your podcasts from. And so do you have any thoughts about using NPS customer surveys to assist with the dashboards? I mean, I think that's a great idea. I mean, not necessarily to assist, but that's another KPI, right? If you think about it. I answered for you. Sorry. You can have your own answer.
Absolutely. So with customer surveys, obviously the business tends to be the first to get those. So we want to get a little closer with them to help interpret what they mean so that we can then turn around and say, okay, learning team, how can we impact this and improve it? And just kind of creating that full performance feedback loop. I think we really need to do some work to close the gap there, but we're on our way. And that's exactly because at the end of the day, it's those real world metrics that the leaders love to see. So we want to be able to get those metrics in, see what that baseline is, and then deliver that learning intervention and see where we end up, not only with MLevel, but also with metrics like that and feedback like that.
Totally. And for those of you who may not know, NPS is, at least my understanding, is Net Promoter Score, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. If you don't have any other questions, anyone, we will say farewell until next time. Hopefully we'll see you in February, if not before.
Thanks all. Take care.